Slavery is alive and well today. And what I find interesting is that people get on their moral high horse because they want justice for people who've never been slaves because of what happened to their ancestors generations ago. And these same people couldn't care less about people who are literally in slavery today.
In relation to race and the church, what do you think that the church is doing right? And where do you see us having room to grow?
Yeah. Well, I, and even more so in recent years, am really careful about that term, the church. Because there are churches that do very well on this issue and a bunch of other issues, and there are churches that do very poorly. The other thing is that not every church is called to the same thing. There are some churches and some Christians. I mean, for example, I'll give you an example. We're a pro-life family. I mean, we are absolutely a pro-life family. I've been involved in the pro-life movement for decades. We're an adoptive family. I tell people that, we were involved in the pro-life movement for so long that we went from telling people, give your baby life, to telling them, give your baby to us, and so we're a pro-life family, we're an adopted family. That's important to us. But we don't believe that everybody is called to that, right? We don't believe that everybody is called to respond to it the same way that we respond to it. And there are other people who are involved in things that are very significant. There are people over there who are, giving themselves and giving their lives to, sex trafficking, for example. And when we run into problems as Christians is when we see our thing as the only thing and believe that all Christians are to be judged by the standard that we set based on what the Lord has put on our plate, right? And I think what we're doing now is we're doing that about race, right? And we're saying that race is everything. It's the only thing. And anybody who doesn't have this in the forefront is not a real Christian, is not a serious Christian, so on and so forth. And nothing could be further from the truth. And here's one way that I found to make that point to people, even to people who are just up in arms about race and, and racial, justice and, whatever they want to define that as. Here's one thing that I say, do you realize that there are more slaves in the world today than there've ever been? Like sure enough, for real, slaves. Slavery is alive and well today. And what I find interesting is that people get on their moral high horse because they want justice for people who've never been slaves because of what happened to their ancestors generations ago. And these same people couldn't care less about people who are literally in slavery today.
That's good. That's real good. And I think that's something that you would ask me when we first started talking is, why does everybody have to care about race? And for me, it was justice. Why does everybody's call have to be to social justice?
She wanted everybody to be just as passionate about justice as she was. And I definitely think that God, one of the unique things that God put in your heart, the way that he made you, is that you came out of your mother just caring about justice, being passionate about it. And I think that that's why the enemy hijacked it for so long, is that, the enemy had you entrapped in this kind of counterfeit version of justice, because that was part of how God made you. And your pretend friends when you were a child.
You ain't got to bring my imaginary friends into this.
Were orphans.
They
you
really
wanted to run an adoption agency, and that was just how God made you. And I think that that's what made it such an easy thing for the devil to kind of lead you into this counterfeit. So it wasn't that your heart for justice was bad, but you really thought that
Jesus was a social worker. Yes, I did.
My problem was that
did.
I wasn't as passionate about the same issues as you were.
Because Jesus was all about social justice.
I know. We used to
Yes.
have these conversations.
So listen, when I was in university, I was at Rice University. I was playing football at Rice University. God calls me to preach. And long story short, I transfer, my senior year from Rice University to Houston Baptist University. And I went from, being on a football scholarship to having to pay for school. And so I got a job. By the way, I was married, already had a daughter. And so I had a job. And what did I do? I went to social work. I worked at a group home. And then when I went to seminary, and in Fort Worth, I worked at a group home, and was working in social work at the time. So that's another thing that it's so ironic. Number one, people say, I must have grown up privileged. That one makes me chuckle. The other one is I must have grown up, not in a Black, community or neighborhood or whatever. That one makes me go beyond chuckling to just right out laughing, and then the other one is, not concerned, about the plight of Black people and whatnot. And so, I started the Black Student Fellowship at Houston Baptist University. My first several jobs before I, started working in full-time ministry were in social work and in group homes, working in minority communities. And so it is just not true to say that I'm not concerned about justice and haven't always been concerned about justice or about the plight, of people who look like me. It's just that I understand the nature of that plight differently. If nothing happens with the police, if nothing happens, with, whatever affirmative action and set-asides and reparations and this, if nothing is ever done by anyone, we will dramatically improve the plight of Black people if we preach the gospel and apply the gospel in the area of biblical manhood, womanhood, marriage, and family. It will be transformational without the government doing a single thing.